everyone. I'm Abigail Solomons. Welcome to We the People. Very excited to do the second episode that will really be focusing on the Constitution. Who's the people? When we talk about we the people, it's a phrase that has been used, that is used so easily, naturally, universally to talk about various groups of people. And today we're going to spend a little bit of time just talking about this. When we say we the people, who are those people? Who are we referring to? How do they play with our constitution? As activists, as human rights practitioners in the space, how do we define this group for ourselves and also in the work that we do? So, as I said, Abigail Solomons, I'm a program manager with Positive Vibes, and I'm going to hand over for a quick round of introductions. Ricardo, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again. I'm Ricardo. I'm based in Cape Town and part of the Positive Vibes team.
Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Awesome. My name is Ndilo Kelwantengwe, and I'm with Positive Vibes Trust. I'm the program officer for Venture.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bradley Fortain. I am with the Lesbians, Gays, and Bisexuals of Botswana, in Botswana. And it's lovely to see everyone again.
It is.
Hi, everyone. This is Jonathan Solomons with Positive Vibes Trust Namibia, and I'm super excited to be here for our second.
Okay. Jonathan, you must tell your face to like look excited. I think that's the Namibian face. Like that's the Namibian face. Like we all like. Let's try to fake that smile. So we the people. I was thinking about this. Like if you translate it into Afrikaans, means ons die mense. And there's such a particular group of people that you immediately see when you translate it to Afrikaans, ons die mense. It's people that look like Ricardo. And Brent. So it's easy. It's easy to conjure a picture of who those men's are. I think it's less so when you use a language as universal as English to describe we the people, but we use it so naturally and so easily to talk about someone. So when you use that term we the people, who do you think of? Who do you engage with? Any thoughts from you the people?
Okay, I think for me, when I hear the phrase "we the people," it's people that I think about are groups that are marginalized, because it's in a way we are affirming or reaffirming that we are people, and there's sort of that when you want to emphasize that we are people, we the people. So and most of the time when that comes across, it's mostly groups that are marginalized, that are sidelined, that are fighting for recognition, for realization. When I see that phrase, it's sex workers, it is LGBTIQ people, it is Black people, it is people who earn minimum wage, who are not protected, young girls, women, all these vulnerable groups that are saying, look, we are people, we are the people. Yeah.
Thanks, Bradley. I think what you raise is so important. It's the collective, it's we. And I also get, especially when you use it in English, when it forefronts a specific conversation, I do get the fight behind the we the people, and definitely the sense of marginalization as well. So yeah, Ricardo, I think you had something.
And I think I think, and maybe, you know, there's a way that we use that word, we, um, often as a way to reinforce like a tribal identity. There's a thing that we are a part of. So, you know, we we the 50-year-old coloureds, um, and then an identification of like being a part of that, or like we, the sex workers, or we, and in a way, you know, I think we've also, certainly those of us who have worked in the sector and other activist sectors, we recognize the sensitivity of that question of legitimacy, like who are you to say we? And the reaction that people get when they inappropriately over-identify. And so I think for me, there's that way, that more familiar way of thinking about what we means, and it's from inside the tribe. I think in the context of a constitutional conversation, and I mean, anyone who's had this conversation with me, I love the preambles to the Constitution that are these, they're like the spirit, the soul of the document. And South Africa's way of talking about we is less tribal, and it's almost more possessive. It literally says that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And so I think for me, I don't actually, like you've said, Abby, I don't actually conjure up a particular group in the context of this constitutional we. I think the cool thing about that is that definition of it belongs to all who live in it. It's not even it belongs to all who are naturalized South Africans. It's like, if you live here, this belongs to you. You are we. You are part of it. And so, yeah, I do think, and maybe that's part of the issue with the whole constitutional discussion, is that sense of people defending a tribalism and not fully appreciating how expansive that we is.
Very much so. Can I build on Ricardo's point? Awesome. I totally agree with what was now said by Ricardo, and also linking that to Bradley, because I feel that there's definitely a connotation that it has, and that it's always been linked to. For example, just the groups of people that Bradley identified or brought out right now around activists and people that belong to a specific group, categorically, or vulnerable groups. And I'm not sure if the context or the meaning itself shifts when it is used in other spaces, like Parliament, for example. I'm not sure how, when someone maybe says we the people in Parliament, it's always that someone is there talking about other people, but never refers to themselves as the people in Parliament. So I'm not sure whether it would take on a different kind of meaning when we are looking at other spaces. So perhaps, and linking again to what Ricardo just touched on, so perhaps it also signals a sense of belonging and connection to those who can relate, like the people that are often the ones that Bradley spoke about, marginalized, vulnerable, and I suppose also just people that share a specific connection and claim that identity for themselves.
And I think that's, I emotively, when I feel it, it's not the big people. When I hear it, it's the marginalized voice. And I think it's that. If you look at the Constitution, it's for all. And that is the language. Even if we look at Namibia's preamble, it's whereas we the people of Namibia, it's everyone in Namibia. When we use it not in the preamble, in other contexts, I get more of that, it's a fighting for a specific group. So in the Constitution, I fully get it. What we the people means, I think emotively, and how we connect with it with our activism, it's less so. And also we the people has been used as like the people have spoken to silence, and yeah, so I think context does matter. So we lost Jonathan for a second and he rejoined. Jonathan, would you like to get into what you were trying to say?
Okay, so when I think of we the people of Mensa, Onsti Mensa, um, for me personally, I think of the South, the community that's there, the neighborliness. It's not necessarily the tribes that live there, but anyone that has grown up there or is from there knows what I'm talking about. That is unity. Everyone looks out for everyone there. There's just a sense of responsibility over each other. So when I think of we the people, I think of that is what it should be. It's not necessarily that anyone gets left behind regardless of who or what they are.
So there's definitely some emotions, there's some imagery that you connect to with that phrase, we the people. And Ricardo he linked it specifically to our constitutions, and many of our constitutions uses this phrase. It opens with this phrase, we the people. Is that deliberate? Was that deliberate? I think so. I
think so.
You want to say?
No, sorry, go ahead. I thought you had completed your thing.
No, go.
Yes, I think so too. I think that it was deliberate because, and I think it comes back to how I see how the context perhaps it doesn't, the meaning when it occupies different spaces, it probably takes on a different meaning, because when the people put together the Constitution, once upon a time, they were also the people. And they were at the forefront of our liberation struggle, for example. And now when we're looking at in our own Namibian parliament, those same people who once belonged to a specific tribe or identified and claimed the specific belonging of being part of the people have occupied different kinds of identities now within these spaces of power. And I suppose that the meaning itself has even for themselves, I would say, withered. And so that's why I think that it started off like that, maybe when the Constitution was drafted as the people, but now those same people are not the people anymore, I think.
And linked to that specifically, I think if we take it to the Constitution, the concept of democracy, the concept of equity, maybe not so much equity, but equality, is, I think those linkages are made. And I think we do forget when because it becomes so easy to say we the people and just self-reference as a country, forgetting that those people have differences, have nuances. So yeah, I definitely think of democracy when I think of democracy as the lens that we should be looking at when we engage with the concept of we the people. When we talk about we the people, I think we have to make those very specific links to democracy if we're having the constitutional conversation. And I don't think we always get it right.
I agree. And I think sometimes that the people that are now in these positions of power, at some instances, they also weaponize that identity to say, but I have been part of the people, so you cannot hold me to a different standard because I am a part of the people, yet the positions of power speak something else. And so they can easily invoke that when there's a different space that's been occupied.
I think for me, and just reflecting on what she had said, Abby, earlier, on that essence of community, belonging, solidarity of we, the people. And I think that the fact that it's in constitutions, in national anthems, it's in the Botswana national anthem also. That's because it's linked to what Njile said about freedom fighting for most, if not all, the countries. But then now also in a way, it's sort of, yes, I don't want to say it's lost its meaning also, but it's become like that phrase that's like, oh, we the people, in a way. So as much as it's also like a symbol, a tag, for unity, for people coming together for a purpose, when politicians do that also, for them it's for beneficial gains and not in, we the people, solidarity moments, right? I felt like a man when I said that. But yeah, I think also, because a lot of times when the national anthem is sang here, it's, this is our land, it belongs to the people, like loosely translating it, we should all work together to develop the country and all. I don't think, I mean, for me also, and me personally, I don't see the we as the whole of Botswana, in that this is our land, we, the people, it belongs to us. When looking at the constitution also, I don't see that speaking to me also as a minority group in Botswana. Just touching on the Court of Appeal ruling, where the Court of Appeal upheld the High Court judgment in recognition of same-sex sexual relations. That I read the judgment, which I thought it's a really beautiful judgment also, because it affirms one's constitutional rights, right? And the Court of Appeal is once again saying that the rights to freedom, security, land, health, identity, all of that belongs to the people. And who are the people in this case? It's everyone in Botswana. And then the court also made that argument, the fact that the challenged penal codes in sections in the penal codes, they were contradictory to the Constitution, which, Constitution is supposed to protect us all. It's supposed to speak to non-discrimination of everyone in Botswana, but that is still happening. We face discrimination every day where we go, whether it's in schools, going to the shops. Just this morning at the Ministry of Health, I had my little tote bag and I was holding it like this and walking, like, prancing. The security guards were like, sort of doing like a mocking thing, like, oh, look at you, So when there are sections in the penal code that goes against the protection of minority groups, the people, there are certain people in with the people that then also feel like they are patriotic when they make fun of me as a gay man who expresses differently, even though Constitution says anyone in Botswana can express however they want. Yeah, I was talking also. I don't know what. Yeah, but yeah, those are my thoughts.
That's what Bradley's saying is a really nice. It's a link between what you said, Abby, about those concepts of equality and equity. And I think it's also about what Jonathan said. When you picture the South, it's not specifically people in the South who are the people, but the symbolism of the values of togetherness and kind of solidarity and shared responsibility. I think often in these types of legal debates, kind of like the one that Bradley's just talking about in Botswana, there's often this argument that we, the people, society is not ready for equality, is not ready for equity, is not ready to give equal freedoms to everyone. And I think that really does challenge this phrase of then who is this society, right? It's we can't, in the South African Constitution, that phrase that says South Africa belongs to all who live here, we're not assuming that the people are the same identical majority of anything. It's recognizing diversity. It's recognizing a kind of collectivism. It's recognizing that this equality and equity are the only way we can be that people who are not like part-time. We're not like in a timeshare relationship with our country. We are equal shareholders. It's not like we just rent it for 2 weeks and then we give it back to the popular majority. And so I think these concepts are importantly built in to that phrase, equality. We fight for that, but in some ways it's already been, it's been given, it's affirmed in those words, and it's affirmed in the diversity of who makes up that population. We are the people collectively, not one type of people, many different types who form this collective. And I think for me, that's partly why the Constitution becomes important. One, we know it's this fundamental, foundational, essential, grounding law. But at the same time, it's about a vision. It's about a vision for, let's say, Namibia, where Namibia as a whole looks like Namibia in the South, in the essence of that neighborliness. And I think partly why many of us have felt distanced from or disenfranchised from that phrase is because we've been distanced from the idea of the Constitution as like a future present vision or a future present promise.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. It's not yet ideal. We're working towards it, but we are working towards it. And I think my last comment here is maybe to Dilo's point. I mean, I talk about this a lot. I actually don't think that politicians are elected to positions of power. I think the positions they end up occupying are very powerful and influential. But we elect people to these positions of trust to do what Bradley talked about. Theoretically, we trust those people to protect those most basic constitutional aspirations, the vision, the promise. People don't believe this. Abby, you certainly don't believe this. You know, I'm like a deeply sensitive guy. I am.
Very. I literally felt that, like, in my soul.
I'm a deeply sensitive guy, and I think we all know in our personal lives the deeply kind of wounding effect of like a betrayal of trust. Right? We've given trust to someone who then kind of breaks the promise, breaks that trust. And I think that's maybe why politically and socially we can often feel so distanced from this idea of we the people, this collective shareholdership, because the people who are very powerful have broken a promise to protect those things that we've trusted them to protect, which is our collective identity. And so, yeah, I when we talk about that whole thing, the we the people, I think it's words. I think it's a statement of belonging, like Dilo said, but I think it's also about this guarantee of a promise. There's a promise that we belong to one another, even though we're diverse.
Ricardo, do you think that the phrase "we the people" might be giving way for that sort of discrimination? Like, let's take Namibia, for instance, the majority tribe, Oshiwambo speaking people, they are the main supporters of the SWAPO ruling party. So if they think that we the people belongs to them, they are the people, and anything or anyone that deviates from that ideology is automatically like isolated. We are a Christian nation. We are anti-abortion. We are anti homosexuality. So if anyone is not part of that vision, that movement, they're automatically not part of the people that that constitution is for.
I think that's what I was saying earlier. You know, when I talked about tribalism, I'm not talking about ethnic tribes. I mean that idea that we place ourselves in boxes of belonging, and you know, you are in this tribe or you are in that tribe. I think that when the majority interprets we to mean, you know, us exclusively, we are the in tribe, and those other deviants are outside the tribe. I don't think it's because the constitutional language has permitted that. I think it's a misapplication that often just goes unchallenged until you get things like, you know, Lekhabibo in Botswana, who challenged the constitutionality of that assumption. It's not true that we are not ready. It's not true that we are not um, victimized. It's not true that we are Christian, because actually we're a very dynamic, pluralistic, diverse society, and we all have a place in that we. I just don't think that that's why this conversation Abby's kind of leading in is so important. I don't think we analyze that enough, so that we have the language, confidence, sophistication, experience, you know, even the same kind of economic experience, social experience, to be able to push back and say, actually, no, we belong in that too. You are not the sole representatives of that collective.
And I think that for me is the thing. If I even look at how it is phrased within our preamble, we, Namibia citizens, people of Namibia, there's a collective identity linked to the people. There is also a collective affirmation, responsibility thing we said we would do. I sometimes get the feeling that people think the Constitution was the one instead of the framework in which to reach our wins on how to ensure that Namibia never undergoes apartheid, colonialism, racism, all the isms. But I don't get a strong sense of diversity when I read it, when I engage with it. I think it's the problem for me is that it is so speaking to one identity, but also I think that the potential there, and Ricardo segued us into, I think, the next part of the conversation, is then how do we activate the we if the we is not a part of the majority? We've been engaged in so many civic participation processes, specifically in this area globally, community-led monitoring. What does community look like? Is it civil society? Which is it's not. Who are the people that we are representing within our responses when we say that the people have spoken? LGBT people have spoken, but it's literally only Jonathan sitting in that space. Yeah, so I think there's opportunity for us to activate, to use the language within our preamble, within our constitution when we speak about the people. I think we also need to be, I think for myself, I am very aware of the image that is connected to the people. And it is around that freedom fight we have won. So the Constitution is the win. I don't think it's for us. I think we're starting to get into that space where we are engaging with the Constitution as the framework, the thing that really guides us, the protection of minorities. and starting to activate a little bit of how do we monitor, how do we engage, and who those people are. So just want to flag that. If any thoughts around then how do we activate the people?
Yeah, I mean, first thing that jumps into my head around the opportunities, activating the we, because and just listening to how everyone was explaining it, also how there's the various example tribal groups, collectives. So if it's women, if it's Oshibambu tribe, if it's, you know, the rich, like that. Everyone has their own little pockets of we. And then even within that, there's also those intersectionalities between the various little pockets, you know, one being Black, Oshibambu, women, poor, one living with HIV, is gay, is rich, like all those cross-cutting elements that can make the small pockets of we into a bigger, I don't know, connection, expansion of we to make one solid we, you know. That phrase of we're a movement by ourselves, but we're a force when we are together, sort of like that. I think realizing, understanding that as much as we are all different, we all have our, we are all similar also in our struggles for recognition. That's an opportunity to spark it, right? The allies, the connections, the partnerships, the voices that come out when someone else sees that, okay, so the queer community in Botswana managed to challenge, you know, the penal code, and I can do that too with my group, and or what do I learn from that can help the sex worker movement or women's movement and all. Yeah, so not working alone in you know, someone or group working there, but really just realizing, acknowledging, working on the intersectionalities within our various we pockets so that it comes together, you know.
And it's recognizing those we pockets, that everyone is not the same, that everyone is not the collective we. I think when we, just touching on what you say, Bradley, especially with the work that we do, even the language that we use in our spaces, so many, like all the two organizations sitting in the space, we work with LGBT members and we use it as we the people, like we work with LGBT plus I, whatever, you, what we want to add to. And we treat that group as we the people, with it is all inclusive. There is no nuances in response, in experience. I think activating, engaging truly with the people is to have a lens of exclusion instead of like a lens of inclusion, because we the people is it's an inclusion concept. For me, I think it is that lens of exclusion. Like when we're talking about we the people, what are those things that really do protect us all in the same way? And what, Dilo, you are doing it, like you're gonna ensure that this is gonna be like a running thing throughout all our podcasts.
When people does a second
yeah. So yeah, that's, I think, activating, especially for in the work that we do, it is that lens. It's the lens not of inclusion, it's the lens of exclusion, and really engaging within what are we talking about when we say we the people. Are we really talking to everyone that constitutes that space? Is our data representative of the actual community? Can you go see the abbeys, the colored mother of 3 living in academia, earning a certain amount of money. Like, can you see that person? Can you see Ricardo in Cape Town walking into bathrooms? Can you see that specific demographic in spaces?
I hope no one sees that. Also, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. I want to say a couple of things. Just this needs an intervention. Point one, we pockets. That feels like a kind of thing you might develop as a product for Christmas, right? Sorry, kids, global supply chain issues couldn't get you that PS5, but here, I got you a Wii pocket. That's got nothing to do with this conversation. There were 2 or 3 things I just wanted to say to your question about activation. One is that, you know, we talk about this, the Constitution maybe as being it's a constitutional vision, it's a promise, it's a future present aspiration. But all of the preambles start, and Namibia's got a great one, South Africa has a great one, that the thing that unifies us, whether you are black, white, colored, whatever, whether you are gay, straight, bi, something in between, whatever you are, Christian, atheist, the thing that binds us is a little bit of our history, and the preambles all start that way. Having come from injustice, having come from oppression, having come from apartheid, having come from separation, now we are, and there's like a point in time where the Constitution is like a break from what we've come from, our history. That's the thing that binds us into this new promise of something future. And I think the activation in part is we don't speak enough about the collective history that has brought us to this point to make a break from the past. We don't really talk about it at school. Maybe we learn informational facts, but you know, it links a bit to our conversation in our last podcast, last podcast, that we don't talk a lot about civics. We don't do a lot of kind of civics education. There are generations in South Africa who have never grown up anything other than free. They're not necessarily economically free, but politically, technically they are. And so we don't have a way to talk about the history that we come from, which makes our future so dramatically different, and why diversity and space for diversity and the larger collective we, why that's so special, and why tribalism can't be an okay thing, because we know what we've come from. You can't be a black person who is homophobic and not think, but wait, I've suffered under the same type of oppression before I found some freedom. Why am I restricting that for others? Right? There's a history, a moment, and then this future promise. And I just don't think we talk enough about it. And so that for me is part of the activation. Where's the space to talk about the thing we have broken from that makes our new promise, you know, like the South? I think that's one. I think the second is maybe a bit, again, plug for our last podcast. We have to vote, right?
Yeah.
The vote is like holding ourselves and the collective accountable for that constitutional promise. And I don't understand why, one, we continue to elect people who show complete disregard for it. They've demonstrated to us they're not going to do the work to get us to that promise. And so I do think that there's something there as well. I know sometimes standing in a line to vote is like a lot of work, but I do think there's like, that's one way to activate, is to actually see the political as a way to like participate and not be this whole, you know, I'm not into politics, blah, blah, blah. Politics is into you, whether you want it or not. And unless you can find a way to Yeah, it's true, right? It's like in every part of our lives, unless we can find a way to really participate in these really fundamental things, we're not activated.
I'd like to add to that, to build onto that, and I think it's very much cross-cutting to just now what Ricardo touched on and Abigail. And it was first I think just the description of this demography, who reaches them and how do you reach them and how are they also part of the people, for example. And I think for me it comes back to growth also. In, I don't know, in its most basic forms. I think that people can grow out of spaces, out of groups, out of communities. And I think it's almost that they're allowed to. It is almost your democratic right. When we look at legislative change and it forces and it demands you to change with that legislative reform, for example. And so this somehow people have internalized this growth or this change as permission to divorce themselves from the people. And I suppose that coming back now to just what we the people conceptually means for me, and I think what it should mean actually is it's a concept which demands that we constantly and consistently uphold and affirm the dignity of all people everywhere, regardless of how you've outgrown spaces and people and communities. And I think that is what is where we perhaps activate we the people. And also, as just Ricardo touched on now, that political innateness, whether you like it or not, it is with you, it wants you. And so we the people is really around a way of looking at things and being and affirming things more than it is about occupying specific spaces, because there are specific demographies that will exist in other avenues, in Avis, in Cape Town, for example. And at the same time, they still hold dearly the concept of we the people. And they use that as a lens to affirm the dignity and equality of all people. So I think that yeah, I wanted to just build onto those knowledge products that were shared.
I really love that.
I think just to quickly jump in, everything that Dilo, Ricardo, Abby, Bradley has just said, we the people is really this great concept, this rainbow, the silver lining that we'd like to achieve. But I think it's important to remember that apartheid was such an effective system that it will take us years to really reach that level of unity. Apartheid was so integrated into everyone's lives, to last generations, whether it's there or not, whether the system is really in place or not, just to keep that disunity amongst people. It's very much ingrained in especially South Africa and Namibia. The power of apartheid has not yet gone. So unless that is really eradicated, we the people will just remain a concept, an idea at the end of the day.
I want to jump in very quick and say I disagree, right? So I disagree with that. I think that socially, yes, we will live a legacy for many, many generations of separation, of kind of disunity, of seeing the other in people who are different from us. We will live a legacy of financial kind of stratification, people who have wealth and people who don't. The difference is, and I think this is Abby's word about a framework, the difference is it's no longer legitimate. And so we the people is a term we have to appropriate. If we don't take it, if we don't kind of claim it and act on it, then we can continue to be whatever we were in and live in the shadow of apartheid. We have to be able to like stand up inside of this promise that's not about 10 years, 20, 50 years from now. It's now, it's present, future. We have to appropriate it. And so I think the power of this new kind of constitutional thing, the independence for South Africa, for Namibia, why Botswana pushes for changes to the penal code in line with that promise that says, hey, we are part of the people too, is you now have a framework to say, that's not legitimate anymore. And there's lots of people who will say, you know, what difference has, for instance, marriage equality um, and decriminalization, what difference has that made in South Africa? You're still getting homophobia, you're still getting violence, you're still... The difference is that people can now fall back on a law that promises to protect them. And so I do disagree a little. I do think that mindsets and attitudes are going to stay with us for a while. I think that social inequality will take a while to even out. I don't think that has to stop us from getting closer to that vision faster if we got less apathetic about it. And I think our societies have settled into the idea that that thing was normal.
Yeah.
And I don't think it needs to remain normal. We just need to, Abby's word, get a little more activated in every space we can.
And I think that's the thing for me. It's like this is work. It's not sitting. It's not like laws were crafted, rules were put into place, language was shared, ideas were cemented, religion was taught to like really push apartheid. And the pushback was universal, collective hurt, sense of injustice, a sense of this can't go on. We can't be these people that see differences based on color and blah blah blah. And I think this is it's and it was shared that there are books, there are stories, there is a history that you can read up on across regions globally on the specific case. There's like slavery books, stories being told. Our children know if you say slave, like they can describe it, because this is something that is still being shared. I think we're not doing enough to share, showcase, document, develop, personalize, empathize that collective hurt for other marginalized groups. And I think that's why it's so important for me specifically, I think, to continuously check my own privilege, because I'm definitely included in many of these frameworks. But if I look at my daughter, who is just growing up in a different suburb, she's a different age, she definitely has a different socioeconomic status, she is part of this whole teenage pregnancy numbers. Like, her story is very different, and it's telling of that story. I think that is so important, because two colored women don't have the same story, and we don't have the same history, and we getting lost in that. There needs to be collective hurt. We need to feel it. That's the only, I think, catalyst for change, is like deep feeling. I think there's a lot of deep feeling.
Let's say this really quickly, Abby, just on your comment, and to Sasha's, will we ever overcome the legacy? And you're talking about this being work. In order to kind of overcome, I think, that really steep gradient of oppression that is our history, I think you can't just go halfway. Going halfway up that steep hill gets us sliding back down. And I just think for many of us, we have become quite comfortable in the halfway measure. We've got the kind of revolution, we've got the change in dispensation, and many of us we're okay. And I just don't think it gets us far enough. So I think, to Sasha's comment, will we ever? I think as long as we're like, okay, going 60%, that doesn't get us far enough. We need much more kind of ambitious, this is not like militant, but we have to go faster, and we've got to go all the way. And I think many of our strategies and civil society initiatives are very comfortably domesticated. It doesn't go far enough. And so we never really see the change we can imagine.
The fight for human rights can never be complacent. You can never be complacent. There's always checks that you should actively try to meet. And if you don't meet them, then you need to reorganize what work you are busy with, how you are engaging with the people on the ground. I think there's questions that we constantly just need to ask ourselves, ask our governments, ask international bodies, measurements that we engage with. Bradley?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add on also, because I think the idea of, you know, collective hurt coming together, because I think also, you know, activism for me also, it's sort of, it came about because of the injustices that I personally faced, right? And trying to also, realizing, acknowledging the other people's struggles also, the gaps in the Constitution and the opportunities that are there for inclusion. This is a big word also that everyone is throwing around now, inclusion. So there are small, the overall thing about the constitutional review that is happening, supposed to happen, right? And this was a promise made by the president. So it's going to happen it was supposed to have happened this year, but it's probably going to happen next year. So in a build up to that, there are several public conversations, engagements that are happening across the country at the Kotla meetings about the Constitution, about human rights, and so forth. So for Lehavivo also, it's that opportunity to also then further our human rights training, our understanding around the Constitution, around the law, that communities do have voice power to influence change, right? And showing examples, you know, of how change was brought. You know, change came about when the people said, it's enough. We want to be included. We want to be, whether it is access to rights, you know, SRHR rights. I like that. And so someone mentioned earlier on, okay, there possibly are some people that may have fought for recognition and then they got it and then like, okay, we're done. I don't know about the sex workers, that side, you know, so that's separation also within our collective effort for recognition. Those boundaries, borders need to be cut. And sort of dismantling that walls of separation and working in silos and all. So making use of the opportunities, demanding, you know, constitutional reviews also. I don't know if it's the same in Namibia where people can demand, well, we didn't demand it, the president said, oh, we'll do this for you. And now the people are, and the good thing is he made that promise when he was campaigning. People kept reminding him like, oh, yo, by the way, dude, Mr. President, you did say you're going to do a constitutional review. When is that happening? So everyone kept asking, when is that happening? So that follow up by the people to keep reminding him that you made a promise to the people. Your term is almost coming to an end in, I don't know, 2-3 years. This process needs to happen now. And now the fact that all the people are jumping on board also and intent on having community engagements around the Constitution, the decrim cases, all these human rights cases that are happening in court that influences the Constitution. You know, for me, I see it also as communities following up, asking, demanding, being accountable also.
Love
and
it.
saying,
I was waiting,
yo, dude,
I was waiting. I was waiting for that word.
To say it, I think that's probably like one of my favorite words for this year: transparency, voice, power, accountability, and all of that. And the fact that the way that it needs to be planned out, also, it should not be done in a one-size-fits-all approach, but identifying the various groups that are there, the pockets, realizing the intersectionalities, the we pockets, and having honest conversations, and people, having courage also to say, look, this is what we want to see, even if it's that one person who is a minority.
Yeah.
And it's only that one voice, but that voice also has power, has influence. So realizing all of that, and how do we spark that? I think that's the million-dollar question also. How do we spark community participation in all these processes?
It's that act of accountability. It's the consciously stepping into space, challenging, demanding. Like, the promise was made. Why are you not realizing that promise? Like, we put in the rule of law, there are policies, there are frameworks, there are treaties that we've signed. There's so many things that we engage with. There's money assigned to specific outcomes that the Constitution wants to realize, and it is constantly walking and working and pushing in that space of accountability that you remind us of. Like, it's conscious, it's very active, it's planned for.
And I think our approach also, and the reason why Lahi was also going to start doing community engagements around the Constitution also, was for us to see ourselves inside there, I think, and linking this to the processes that we've done for the past couple of weeks, are especially around community-led monitoring, that process of communities being involved in it. So not it being done by government. Government has its own agenda, its own priorities, but communities being there, validating it.
Representation really does matter.
Yeah, and reminded me of the conversation also. Well, one of the ladies this morning, she sort of annoyed me at the ministry when she was like, oh, healthcare, we know like service delivery is bad, especially for your communities. We don't know, it might change in the next 3 years or so. But I was like, no, Laribo has a method, system, a platform that can literally help you change, improve service delivery from your supposed 3 years to it happening now, That's so it's also about, it's not our job, it's someone else's job. But
we have 2 minutes left on this particular conversation, and we're definitely going to continue this conversation. I think the next podcast specifically delves into the Constitution. I think this conversation around being part of the realization of the Constitution, who's the Constitution for? I think we need to have a little bit, because this is a big concept, like, but it's also not. It literally is who's there. Like, can you see these people when you look at reports? Yeah, when you look at stories, when you look at data, when you listen to your government speaking, when you look at the media, can you see yourself in this story? Or if you cannot, like, how do we make sure we become part of that story?
Is there literacy around the Constitution? Do people know what it is? Do people know what's in it?
There's not. And this is something that we consistently find in our work. There's not a lot of human rights literacy. There's not constitutional literacy. We just talked about a preamble. People are like, what? Like, what's a preamble? There's so many concepts, big concepts, lofty concepts that hold a lot of power, hold a lot of direction and weight. Accountability is one of them. that I think we as practitioners who work in the space have not fully engaged with, let alone the people that we're working with. So literacy is definitely one of, I think, the things that we should be looking out for. What does a literate community look like? It's not just the knowledge, knowing of, it's the activation, it's the mobilization, it's the talking about, it's the using of whatever we know to engage with whatever mechanism is on the ground. It is the gay boy talking about, but we also need land. It's not just having the conversation around sodomy, but how do we transfer the skills that we have as practitioners, that everyone should become a practitioner in human rights, I think. So I will give anyone the last word before I close the session.
I'm not sure if what I will say is the last word, but I can give it a go.
Yes, go Dilo.
I think for me, it's more just a parting message, as I found myself also checking my own privilege amidst this conversation as someone who is an activist, also at the forefront of specific movements, and later on occupying other spaces in which it almost feels as if it is a betrayal again of maybe the trust, or I think maybe just the common identity that we all felt, or that we all feel when we refer to each other as the people. And so for me, the parting message for me is definitely that we the people is a lens from which I must continuously, I think, engage into the world, into civic participation, in order to not lose sight of the fact that we are the people and we belong together. So I think that's definitely for me a parting message and a lesson for coming years. Yeah, I thank you.
From our intersectional feminist, like, Jonathan, you want the last word? I really thought like Dilo had it, but let's give it to
I just want to say on what Dilo just said, we need to start keeping each other accountable. Us as queer activists, we talk about we the people, yet there's this cliquey behavior amongst ourselves.
Buckets.
Yeah, where you have the ones who feel they are more elite than the rest of us, and so really we just need to keep each other accountable and call each other out when the time is needed. Otherwise, we won't move forward.
Yep.
Very much.
Thank you to the youth. Bradley, you don't count. Ricardo, you have not counted for many years. Thank you, Dilo and Sasha, to the below 30s.
Thank you.